my soul afire, oh Lord. Make my life a witness of your power. Fill me with your spirit every hour. Set my soul afire. Set my soul afire, oh Lord. Set my soul afire, oh Lord. Make my life a witness of your power. Fill me with your spirit every hour. Set my soul afire, set my soul afire, oh Lord. Make my life a witness of your power. Fill me with your spirit every hour. Set my soul afire. Set my soul afire, oh Lord. Set my soul afire, oh Lord. Make my life a witness of your power. Fill me with your spirit every hour. Set my soul afire, set my soul afire, oh Lord. Make my life a witness of your power. Fill me with your spirit every hour. Set my soul afire.
Help us to be lucid and help us to be able to grow in this relationship we have with you, dear Lord. And we ask all these things through Christ our Lord. Amen. And so thank you, Marty, Jerry, for being here. Marty is a little bit...
We're having some sound issue. I think it should be back now. Let's make sure if we can just ask, can everybody hear us now?
Can you
Maybe
guys
give us a thumbs up.
Okay, because we were just checking it a few minutes ago and we were good. So hopefully we're up and running okay. Anybody have a difficult hearing, sound?
Somebody should be.
Liz, everybody, can you say something there, folks, to make sure
Yep,
we're okay?
sound good now, they
All
said.
All right, okay, very
Sorry
good.
about
Thank
that.
you, Betty.
All right, very good. So anyway, again, maybe you missed my prayer, but the Lord heard it. That's the important
it
one,
was a
so it's
good
good.
one.
So Jerry is here with me. Marty is not feeling very well. Kind of got a little bit of that stomach flu thing that's been flying around, which I am not interested in myself. And of course, Steve is here as well with all of us. As we talk about this, sustaining ourselves in the spiritual life, this is kind of an important chapter for us. Hopefully, again, there's a lot in here. Hopefully, we'll be able to be clear about some of the things that make it easier for you to understand. So, Jerry, I turn everything over to you.
Okay. Well, let's start out with, St. Augustine's phrase, knowledge alone cannot save us. Apparently, having clarity and truth, facts and understanding about our faith are not enough to enable us to continue to be effective in our faith. So it has to not just be in our heads, right?
No, and that, I think, is a really good start for us. This cannot be, and we're going to talk more about that as things unfold. Why are people leaving the faith? And I would say back whenever I was young, I think we had everything stuck in our heads. We weren't doing anything as far as an encounter into the mystery of all this, the relationship part of all this. All those things were missing in my youth. And I think people were falling away from the church because we still trying to talk to people cognitively as opposed to appealing to their hearts. So, and by the way, conversion, Augustine had two conversions. He had an intellectual conversion, probably at the age of 25. He met Ambrose, and Ambrose convinced him that Christianity was authentic. And it took him 9 years before he had a true conversion that really inspired him. You see, if we really dig into the life of Augustine, he probably had an addiction problem with sexual. If he were living today, he probably would have a pornography issue with all that because he actually lived with somebody at one point. He got someone pregnant at a certain point and had a child with all that. So he was rather promiscuous in his life. And then all of a sudden, at the age of 34, he had this great conversion, which changed everything. So the intellectual was not enough for us or for him. It is this encounter, which I keep beating to death, and I know I do, but I keep on thinking people aren't understanding it. I don't know. I'll ask you guys, do you think people like you guys who are watching us right now, are you understanding what I mean when I talk about this conversion of the heart, this personal intimacy, this encounter? We're going to talk about more today because I think it becomes more and more important as time goes on. But yeah, I think the conversion, the transformation of the heart is the key in all this. Yes.
And it's not like a one-time thing either, is it? It's like it should be constant.
Constant. Yeah. Every day we need to be opening ourselves up unprotected before God once again. Right. Yes, surely.
Yeah, which leads into Rolheiser says the spiritual life is not a quick sprint to a well-marked finish line, but a marathon. An arduous, lifelong journey into an ever-widening horizon.
Yeah, I just ask you, Jerry, how long have you been at this,
Long time.
I know, long time. I was like, I would say I started at this at 24. Yeah. I'm 73. Yeah. So I'm
around the same. I was about like 22.
50 years.
Yeah.
That's a marathon. 22.
I mean, we were both baptized and raised.
Right.
And we had our catechism and all that. But I mean, as far as like making a commitment and saying, as we say, Jesus, come into my heart. I want you to change me.
And he does.
And that's been how many years ago? And
I feel, in one sense, I feel as fresh about that today as I did then. Another sense, I feel I must be just as committed today as I was then. There's no sense of this whereby you just sort of can kind of put it into idle or something. Or you could sort of coast. You can coast. I don't think coasting in the spiritual life work. It's got to be.
And it's different. It's always different.
Always different. Yeah.
You know, in a positive way.
Very nice. Is that Russ or Susie? God isn't finished with me yet. Nice bumper sticker. I got that one. Yeah. That's what. Yeah.
Rolheiser says spirituality is about both heart and head, and asks, how do we develop the heart to sustain ourselves on the long road?
Well, that's what we're going to talk about. Yeah. That's the stuff we're going to talk about. I think that's it. How do we develop? The head's easy. That's where you start. That's an easy one. I gave a talk this week to a bunch of younger folks, and I kept on talking about moving from here to here. And I kind of felt like they kind of didn't hear me at all. They didn't understand there was actually a movement that had to occur. Yeah. In one sense.
I don't think you understand it till it happens. But it's good to tell people to look for it, though.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's a word that stuck out on here was the develop. So we're actually, we're saved by grace.
Saved by grace, yes.
But as far as developing, that's kind of up to us.
Well, yeah, through grace. In grace, yes. All that in grace, yes.
Okay, so we have some of our time-honored, canonized spiritual practice, especially here in the Catholic faith, that we have at our disposal. Rolheiser wants us to take us deeper into these.
Now, here's what he says that we all should be doing. So here's a checklist for everybody. Regular prayer, both private and communal. The practice of charity, self-sacrifice, both at home and in a wider community. Some concrete involvement with the poor. Involvement within the church community. You got to be involved with the community. That's going to come up later on in all this. We're going to develop all these different points right there. And willingness to be vulnerable for love, as Jesus was vulnerable. In other words, Deacon Pat Loxon, a good friend of mine up in New York one time, and I'd pick his brain, different things. And one time he said to be in the world, he lived with ex-cons and drug addicts and different things. And he said, you have to be willing to be taken. In other words, you can't get all mad because you got taken by one of these. You're going to get taken sometimes. Be vulnerable like that. I think that's what he's talking about. People might take advantage of us in some fashion, but that's kind of the way it goes. So private prayer, community, involvement with the poor in some fashion in our world, and being vulnerable in love. That's what he meant also previously about this whole idea of being cheerful in different ways and in community and things like that. But those are the things that he wants us, we said we should be doing. Now, how do we do those things in our world we live in today? That's some of the questions we're going to talk about here today with all that. Okay.
As he talks about what particular exercises and practices do we need today. He talks about today and now, and I'm always interested in spiritual evolution. So can we talk about the necessity of what we need to do today is different than maybe 30 years ago or generations ago?
That's the whole point of this chapter.
Yeah, that's what we're going to get into.
So that's what we're going to jump into, I think, kind of right now.
Okay.
That's good.
So he calls commandments for the long haul. Be a mystic. This is a quote by Karl Rahner, not to be confused with Karl Reiner. Is something we've talked about a lot, but I'd never get tired of hearing of it. That's one of your things.
Yes. The time is fast approaching when one will either be a mystic or an unbeliever, and I think we are here in all of that. Now, I'd like to talk about that in another way if I can, because I mentioned it today at masses, all the masses, and I get a lot of blank stares from people, I guess, with all that, because we think of mystics as Padre Pio, stigmata, bilocating, and all these extraordinary things that happen, but they really have nothing to do with being a mystic. So what I want to do, I want to quote to you from a book that has been very important to me. I've shared this before years ago, I think. And this is a book by Rudolf Schnackenberg, who is a scripture scholar. And I read him a lot in a seminary. And this book that he wrote, called The Friend We Have in Jesus, was his last book that he wrote. The other ones are like that thick. And this he wrote when he was in his late 80s, I believe. And so when I share with you some words from the final chapter of the final book of a man who spent his entire life studying theology. So what would he have to say to all of us? And I'm going to try to cut to the quick here with all this too. And he writes the last chapter, chapter 9, it's called Jesus, Our Friend. He talks about a book that was written by Eugene Beiser, who was the person who succeeded Rahner in his seat in Munich in the university there. He wrote a book called The Friend, Drawing Near to Jesus. And I'm going to skip a bunch of stuff. He quotes, again, Rahner's quote we just talked about here. And then he says this, and I want you really to take this seriously, folks, because this, I see the church going in all kinds of different directions. You got the folks moving in the Trinitine direction, the Latin Mass and different things. You got people maybe moving in the charismatic direction with different things, all these different directions. I think this is where Jesus wants to take us. And in the conclusion, he writes this. The point of departure for our understanding of Jesus is not the Christ from above, as the theological fathers described him, nor the Christ from below, as modern theologians endeavor to characterize him, but the Christ from within, who reveals himself to us through a mystical encounter with him. There we go, mystical, right. Personal, whatever you want to do. I don't care how you want to use the word, personal encounter with him. Christianity is now entering, I believe this is true, Christianity is now entering its mystical stage. The best paradigm for that would be to approach Jesus as your friend. And as we all know, our friends we are personal with. We know them intimately. If Jerry is my friend, I know him intimately. If Steve is my friend, we're not acquaintances. We share our hearts a little bit with each other. Finally, let me say this because of that word mystical that you might be a little bit confused about sometimes. I have some reservations about the expression mystical, which has a long history behind it and is used today in various ways. It sounds too mystifying, too mysterious, too esoteric. By contrast, friendship with Jesus recommends itself because it concerns our external contact with him as much as our internal relationship with him. So he talks about the idea of friendship as being the mystic. Now, we all can do that.
Right.
We all can do that. I don't think there's any great difference about all of that. So this is the idea of being a mystic that I want to present to all of you in all of this. So sounds cultish. Now that surprises me. I don't understand that one, Dawn. You have to maybe explain that one to me sometime. But anyway, that's the idea. And we are all called to this kind of mysticism. And then what Rolheiser goes on to say later on is he says, he calls this mysticism, this personal relationship with Jesus, he calls this making a personal act of faith. And he goes on to say, thus, there is an important challenge at the Rolheiser's comment. To have a living faith today, one must at some time at his or her life make a deep, private act of faith, that act of faith which will be equated as being a mystic. That's the same thing for me.
That's all it is. Yeah. You're not locked up in a cloister or something and you're seeing visions or anything.
No, nothing with visions.
You've just recognized that personal connection you actually have with Jesus is what you're saying. That's it.
Intimate and personal, yes. Does that make sense, folks? That's how I want you to understand all this. I think what you say there, Arlene, is kind of spot on there. But now, is anybody confused by that? Please say something. I need to know if I'm talking about this properly so you understand. Now, what Rolheiser is saying to us here is that being the mystic, making this private, personal, deep act of faith is an essential for us in the future. That this idea of being a mystic is a part of that whole idea. How do we survive in our postmodern world today? I think that's a big part of all that.
Just being part of the club isn't good enough. You have to have something
cultural,
much deeper.
Catholic. You had that down, or not, absolutely not good enough. The way I grew up in my youth, which was simply Catholic culture, that Notre Dame football scores was as important as Sunday Mass.
Right.
Yeah. So it's part. I'm Catholic, so I'm supposed to be for Notre Dame. And Catholic, I'm supposed to go to church, and they're equivalent somehow or other,
Or help make Halushki.
Yeah, or help make Halushki. There you go. Okay, good. Yeah.
Are we going to talk about anti-faith forces?
Yeah, he does talk about that here. He does mention a bunch of them here, and I can kind of like run through them if you'd like to with all these. I'm on page 217. What blocks faith is a myriad of innocent things, our ordinary, normal lives that precisely makes our lives comfortable. Our laziness, our self-indulgence. I got to buy that. I got to have that. Got to have that.
Right.
Our ambition, our restlessness, our envy. Why does so-and-so have something I don't have? Our envy, that's a big issue a lot of times. Our refusal to live in tension. We're going to get to that one.
To that, yep.
Our consumerism, our greed for things and experiences. I got to go here, I got to go there.
Yeah, I highlighted that one because I hadn't thought about that before. How you can get obsessed with your bucket list, and I've got to do this, and I got to do that.
Yeah, I got no bucket list. You know, I don't have anything I think I need to do. Maybe I need to do follow your faith for a while. That's my bucket list, I guess.
I don't have one either.
Yeah. Our need for a certain lifestyle. I got to have the proper car, the proper dogs, you know, all that different stuff, you know. I can have 2 or 3 of them. Our busyness, our overextension, our perpetual tiredness, our obsession with celebrities. I don't know about that. I'm going to touch, man. So anyway, maybe sports and
Beyonce
otherwise.
takes up most of your day. You know.
Yeah. Our perpetual distraction with sports, sitcoms, talk shows. These are anti-mystical forces. And I guess what I say is playing with this thing way too much.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, spilling our time with that.
It's so easy to go down the rabbit hole on your phone with all the different news feeds and everything. That's
Yeah, at least you watch.
and that
news
does,
feeds.
yeah. You know what? And it affects me. I realize what it does to me during my day. And now when I'm in the car a lot, where I used to listen to that a lot, it's so nice to have nothing on.
Yeah.
Just silence when you're doing things. It makes such a difference.
Solitude isn't mentioned in this chapter, but that's a good one right there for something that's very important for mystical, the whole mystical. Solitude, every spiritual writer or person would simply say that's an essential. Solitude.
There were just a few comments. Just when we were talking there, Betsy said, I think it is like falling in love with Jesus every day.
Amen, Betsy.
And
Amen.
Don had another comment, and he said those not in our church community who cannot grasp into your friendship with Jesus. I don't think it's just our church community, though. That would not.
Do other pastors talk about that much? Other Catholic priests talk about that? Don, you might be onto a point there. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I don't get out much. So
No, me either.
I don't get out much.
And Susie said, you must have a personal, intimate relationship, but it isn't easy. Must work at it like any relationship.
Absolutely.
Yes, yeah.
Absolutely. It isn't easy. No, it's not easy. It's an everyday, as Jerry was saying earlier, everyday thing. So
after the need for personal act of faith is a personal faith depends upon prayer.
yeah. Yes.
So that's
yes,
the reasons of prayer, why prayer, and what's the downside of avoiding prayer?
Well, again, I think he quotes Thomas More here a little bit, and some other folks. But anyway, he says if you're not praying every single day, you're going to get depressed.
Right.
You're going to get depressed, or you're going to get all inflated. I'm the greatest thing since bubblegum, or I am a piece of garbage or something. And then he said, either that, you're going to bounce back and forth between depression and inflation, back and forth. So I think what he's trying to say is that you got to do this thing called prayer. It's kind of funny. I read a statistic one time where someone said that what percentage of atheists pray every day.
Yeah.
I forget what the percentage was, but I kind of had to laugh.
Yeah.
But atheists pray. He goes on to say, at one point he says, sometime other words are more useful than the word prayer: meditation, contemplation, inner work, soul work, active imagination, and so on. But he said, he goes on to say, the biggest thing you have to do is you have to make sure that you pray on some level with all that. So that's an important one.
Well, it's part a mysticism for our age.
Oh, now we're getting into something that's a little more complex for us.
Yeah,
right here.
and he talks about prayer is pondering, carrying tension. So this, I think, is something you need to explain. Ultimately, mysticism and prayer are something we must do within all the activities of our lives and not just in certain formal moments set aside. So this is a section that addresses how do we do this?
Now, I think he brings it up, but let me talk about it this way. I got a couple of different things to ponder here. You know, we talked about Mary, the sword will pierce her heart today at Mass. And then behind me, at Mass is that big mural of Mary with the 7 swords. And so those 7 swords represent the 7 mysteries of the Rosary of Our Mother of Sorrows and her struggles, her difficulties. And Mary carried all that. She carried all that. She lost her son. She had to run away from Herod. She had to watch him walking on the cross. She had to watch him being hung on the cross. She had to hold the dead body of her son, in her arms after he was killed. So Mary carried the tension. She didn't run away from anything. This, I think, that makes sense, is what I think he means here by the mysticism of our age, is you and I carrying the tension. Let me put it to you this way, folks. What about the struggles we have in our church, the struggles we have in our country today, the divisions that we have, the problems we see in our world, in the Middle East and Ukraine and different things. And I think we cannot, a lot of times people will say things, I don't watch the news anymore, I can't watch it, it makes me depressed. And I said, you got to get over yourself a little bit with that. And you got to watch it because you got to carry the tension of all those things as a person of hope. And to carry those tensions, I think is very, very important for us because we have to be able to speak to all of that and live to all that. If we're living fully, we're part of this human race that's struggling. I can't get out of my mind what's going on in Gaza.
Yeah.
And then the pain that happens with people in Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. All those things, I think, carrying the tension is the opposite of running away. We can't run away and kind of isolate ourselves in binge watching or something like that.
Or as he says, as looking for an easy resolution.
Yes.
It's kind of a type of running away.
Yeah. I think easy resolution would never be the true resolution with all that. And I think, as we're going to talk later on, I don't know when we're going to get to it, but carrying that tension does transform you.
Yes.
And when you carry the tension of your vocation, like I should be carrying in my heart, in some fashion, all of you, and knowing that many of you struggle with all kinds of different things. That's what happens when you're a pastor for 12, 13 years with all that. But then carrying the tension of all that, not run away from it all. Sometimes I must admit, I'd like to just sort of,
I don't know how you do it.
Not do it. But so that, I think he's saying that's what we need to do. Does that make sense,
Father,
everybody?
well,
Yes.
someone asked, what is another word for tension?
Wow.
Temptation? Like it's
Wow. No. I wouldn't say temptation. That's a really good question. What would you say?
Gosh.
Tension.
I'm
It is
tension. I think
tension.
about pain. I mean, emotional pain.
It is. What would you call what Mary did whenever she searching for her son, running off to Egypt, what was Mary doing?
Panicking and in pain.
Yeah. At the foot of the
Sure.
cross, carrying that tension. Well, that's a really good question. I got to think about that. I don't know exactly what I want to say about that.
Yeah.
That's a really good
It is a very good question to help clarify this for people.
Yeah. Oh wow, wait, you got me thinking about that. If I come up with something, I will let you know. But
someone said desolation. Dawn said desolation. I don't know.
well,
See, all that negative.
Well, it could be because they talk about temptation further here, that tension of sin, later in the chapter. But like you're talking, pain too is not.
even carrying the tension of your sin, I'm sinning repeatedly, and I need to carry that. Here's something that someone said to me one time, and actually it was Deacon Pat Logston, and he's not a priest, he's a deacon. So he was saying to me that a lot of times people will go to confession. They will do this. Now I am all in favor of confession, folks, so please don't take this the wrong way. But they'll have, let's say we have a sexual sin. Let's say, I'll talk about men, kind of about women, let's say it's a problem with this thing with pornography or something. They'll run to confession and go to confession for it. Then they'll go back and they'll do it again. Then they'll run to confession again. Go do it again. You're not really dealing with the tension of what's going on with you. You're trying to run away from the problem
Yeah,
And
that's
confession, and I say to them at a certain point, I say, wait a minute, you realize you're going to go out, you're going to do this again. You going to confession isn't going to fix this. You got to face what's going on inside of you with all this too. And that kind of a dynamic he brought to my attention with all that. So that is what I think we mean when we talk about sin. I got to face, if I have a habitual sin that I'm doing, I got to face, why am I doing this? Before I get to confession, get to forgiveness there. But at the same time, stay tuned for Tuesday's homily, because we're going to talk about that very same thing. Being healed, being healed fully and being healed fundamentally. I forget how somebody says it, but I'm thinking of the woman with the hemorrhage. Remember her? She wanted to touch Jesus' garment. She was healed physically, but once she shared the story of what her trial was, she was healed spiritually, psychologically, in every way. That's what we need to do too, by telling the story. Not just telling them to tell the story. What's going on here with all this? That, I think, is what it means to carry. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I was thinking that ties into something that I scratched out. That
Why don't you go jump
it said it's like, so giving into temptation, whether sexual or just that extra beer or cookie, is a premature fixed attention, which we could consider a sin.
Is that the part you talk about color? You talk about color, that part of the book?
No, we're not there yet. But it's just, if whatever the self-help books tell you about trying to break bad habits, you're carrying attention by not having dessert when you always eat 10 desserts and you weigh 300 pounds,
Okay, yeah.
All right, that kind of tension.
Okay.
Or as you're saying on a sexual thing, it's like, the easy thing to do is for me to satisfy myself with that. But if I hold the tension of not doing, because there's tension involved.
Yep.
By not doing that.
Yep.
Holding that tension is what strengthens us.
I think tension might be the right word here.
Yeah.
I can't think of a better one. I think it might be the right word here.
Yeah, maybe we needed more examples of tension.
Yeah,
instead of redefining
so
it.
we are talking about that. Now, we just shifted a gear to sin, but that's what you guys brought up over there. But that's
I didn't mean
that's
to.
part of this carrying the tension. This is the mystical dimension he's talking about here, that we carry the sin and all this. And I think I don't know where you're at now in the notes, but I'm going to.
Yeah, no, I was just it was some. No, we're back to page 2.
Well, and I'm not going to read them all. People tried to kind of define it, I guess, but it's like I agree with
Stress
with
is pretty
Kim,
good.
but it's a fallen world we live in. That I guess puts these.
Kim, I like your Richard Rohr word there with non-duality. That's
Right.
Yeah,
that's
right.
good,
Yeah.
good.
And that's where she said it is the world we live in, because it's
Yes.
a broken, fallen world. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we live in the tension of living with people who are imperfect like we all are, and doing that kind of rightly in our lives. There's a tension in something. Absolutely, Kim. I think that's excellent.
This is where we are.
Okay, very good.
So
I
it
lost
is.
the place, so.
We are going in order. We're hitting on sin. That's why it's kind of is that kind of what sin is where I brought that up. But
Yeah.
the resurrection follows only after there has been agony in the garden. That's also true of faith.
Yes, yeah. Then we move down to what you wanted to talk about down here about gestation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think this is pretty profound. And again, I hope we kind of talk about this in the right way. The idea of gestation has to do, well, on one level, you said transformation. And if you look it up in your phone, gestation is about a baby being born. That's a transformation, I guess, in one sense.
Yeah.
The 9 months of gestation of the baby.
Constantly transforming.
Yes, yes. So what Jerry is getting at here is that this is beautiful. I don't know the exact quote here. I'm going to read your notes, I think, maybe because it's a little easier for me to get at right here. But he says, he's talking about Jesus. He carried hatred, anger, jealousy, wound long enough until he was able to transform them into forgiveness, compassion, and love. That's a saint, man.
Bam.
That's it. So when we're misunderstood, whenever people just can't stand you for some reason, or you hurt somebody, or You know, I'll give a confession here. I need to go to confession anyway.
Yeah.
I yelled at
You've
my
been doing
mother-
that a
yelled at
lot
my mother-
lately.
Yelled at my mother the other day.
Uh-oh.
Russ, I confessed to Russ about it. I can yell at my
Imagine
mother.
that, being upset with your elderly mother.
I know, who can't hear a lick, you know. So anyway, but I got upset with her. I felt so bad, and I said I was sorry. Called my brother. I haven't gone to confession yet, but I'm gonna. And to be able to do that, but I got to carry that tension of what I did, so I don't do it again. For me, just to go to confession real fast, I'm good now. Then I start yelling around next week.
Yeah, right.
I'm not doing pretty good. And that's not working, man. That's not doing too good. So anyway, and then so I hold on to it until I can transform it into some compassion in my own life. That's, I think, what that means.
Yeah.
With all that.
Then the next sentence says, only someone who has already sweated real blood to remain true to what is highest and best will be able to look at his or her own murderers and say, forgive them, for they know not what they're
Because
doing.
you carried.
So that's so powerful.
I know that is. That's
How
how
you do
Jesus
that.
carried. We got it. We think that Jesus was like John Wayne. You know, he never seemed to sweat. John Wayne never seemed to carry any tension. It was cowboy movies or anything. He always had the right answer. Always had it figured out. Always was under control. Never doubted everything he ever did. That's not Jesus, man. And I think we're describing Jesus here very beautifully, and someone carrying the tension.
Yeah. Transformation is a result of this is my own thought. Transformation is a result of the classical definition of a gestation period. That's the result. So I always like the line, if you do not transform your pain, you will transmit it.
Yeah.
And I don't know who said that first, but Kim, that was a Richard Rohr thing I heard
Okay, there you go.
15
There
years
you go.
ago, 20 years
and
ago.
how true is that? Oh my
How
God.
many people we know transmit their pain every day?
You know,
We don't just get over it.
yeah, when you're transmitting it, you're not getting over it. You're not getting over it at all.
Yeah.
That's really, really good. So that's the whole idea. I think we just come to a conclusion now about mysticism. That's our discussion about mysticism. That's kind of a big one, you know, and now we move to the next one, which I think is just as interesting.
He uses both words, but we'll just use the boldly. Sin boldly. You're as sick as your sickest secret.
You keep a secret.
Another one of your favorite quotes you like
I know.
to use.
Yeah.
So Martin Luther, so let's talk about that. What does that mean?
Sin boldly. What he meant by that, to sin boldly, he meant be honest with yourself. Now, we just talked about that idea of tension and what that all means. Mysticism, having the friend. Okay, we're talking about all these different things. Now he says, a big thing for our world today is we can be honest. We're as sick as the sickest secret, we keep a secret. That's an old AA thing.
Yeah, right.
Now, I remember a priest saying to me one time, and I was a priest whenever he says, unless you, and I had done this already, I've done it 3 times, unless you have shared with one person everything that goes on with you, one person, everything about you, he said, you're not serious about spiritual life. In other words, you've shared every sick secret that you've ever done in your life with some other person who sat there and listened to you talk about all that different stuff. I did that over the course of my first semester at Mount St. Mary Seminary whenever I was in spiritual direction there. It was transforming, absolutely transforming. So he's saying,
I hope it was complete enough, but I remember, it's been a while ago, but we had our own private meeting, and I thought, rather than do it in confession, because I wanted to make sure I had time. I hate holding up the line.
oh yeah, well, confession, whenever you want to do it that way, which is the best way I can think of, that makes perfect sense. So that's what he means. Were you surprised?
And it's very liberating. It really is.
It is very liberating to do that. He writes, it does not, as a superficial understanding might interpret, invite us to sin, but rather it invites us to always be in the space where God can help us after we sin, namely the state that we honestly admit our sins. And I did my master's, by the way, on confession. I remember reading Adrian von Speyer say, don't elaborate. Don't make excuses. Don't give a bunch of details.
Yeah.
Just tell the sin, man. Just get it out there.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and the boldly thing too, is it, because it might be bold to say that I accept my forgiveness. Is that part of being bold?
Yeah. We're going to end up with a prodigal
I'm
son.
bold, you know.
Absolutely. You have to accept your forgiveness. It takes time sometimes.
Yeah, it does. But to Sean and I had this discussion today about this too, about people who are like so afraid they're not going to get into heaven. People that we know and love that are very spiritual people, I would consider in our own parish, that sometimes if you corner them like, well, I don't know if I'm going to get in. And I think
What
if
would
you're not
stop
getting
them?
in, neither am I.
What would
I said,
stop them?
that's not my problem. I don't mean to be boastful, but that's not my problem. I'm not worrying about that.
I never think about it.
I never think about I'm not going to get in. I might in purgatory. I might have the roommate that I don't want to have, but that's the worst. If there's such a
Well,
thing.
Mary Kay, you're off the hook. You're the roommate he wants to have.
Yeah.
You know, so it's good.
But you know what I'm saying is that's kind of bold to accept that God loves you and forgives you.
And in the prodigal son story, I think now one goes on and says that son, that first son that ran off, he at first, I can't believe I'm forgiven. That can't possibly be. But gradually, slowly, he had to come to an understanding of that.
We're going to get to that.
Yes, we will. So hopefully.
Don't get it. Yep.
We're moving on.
We're on page 5.
Well, and I just want to mention, I think of this like in our faith formation, but you know, God doesn't see us as others see us. Like the faults in us.
I absolutely agree.
You know,
Absolutely agree.
people see the good and bad. He only sees the good in us.
I will say to every single person, okay, let's suppose for 4 o'clock, 8:30, 11 o'clock Mass, if the roof caved in during Mass, I can promise you every single person in that church is going to go to heaven. I promise you. Every single person.
Yeah.
Your way there might be more
Bad roommate.
or whatever, but you're going to get to heaven. If the roof cave, you're going to get to heaven. I promise you that. I promise you that. I cannot think, absolutely you will. Absolutely you will. Because you're there. You are there. That matters. You haven't shut the door. Yeah. Hell, I think it's for people that may have shut the door somewhere along the way, but who is that?
Well, is that we can just maybe jump right now into like the unforgivable sin against the Holy Spirit, because that applies to that, right?
Yes, very much. That is a good segue.
That was something that everyone has a lot of confusion about, and you addressed it not long ago in one of your homes. Yeah, daily mass. But
let me just quote the book here a little bit and see what you guys think. What becomes unforgivable about that is not that God does not want to forgive, but that you no longer want to be forgiven. That's the issue of the unforgivable sin. God easily forgives all your weaknesses and will always forgive anyone who wants to be forgiven. But you can so warp your own conscience that you see God's truth and forgiveness itself as God's truth and forgiveness as a lie. I mean, it's a lie that God wants to forgive me. I have talked to people who have said to me, God will never forgive me. That's a lie. I mean, and they kind of throw that off as some kind of weird humility of some sort. It's actually a lie. I mean, to say that about God, come on, man, that's a lie. That to me is close to the unforgivable sin. God's truth itself is a lie as Satan, and see your own lie as truth and forgiveness. Wait a minute, let me back this up again because I stopped in the middle of that sentence there. But you can so warp your own conscience that you see God's truth and forgiveness itself as a lie, as Satan, that God's forgiveness as Satan, and see your own truth, your own lie as truth and forgiveness. That's the only sin that truly puts us outside of God's mercy. Not because God refused to extend mercy further, but because you can look mercy in the eye and call it a lie. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
I think it's pretty clear.
Yeah, because it sort of starts out with the lying motif. You're making a lie out of God's forgiveness. Maybe we should.
Frank, that's a very interesting comment. I like the comment Frank just made. You can't defeat your demons if you're still enjoying their company. I got to remember that.
Yeah,
one.
that's
a pretty
good.
good one.
That's
That's a good
good.
one. Thank you for that one.
If we can briefly touch on the next aspect, honesty as letting us see colors again.
Now, this is the part that I thought you were talking about before. Now, this kind of, I have to admit, folks, this kind of baffled me a little bit
Yeah, I was hoping you'd explain it a little.
because he goes on to tell a story of this. He's a man, early middle age, unmarried, gay, who cares? Even though his religious life is essentially in order, he suffers from two interrelated addictions, masturbation and alcohol. And so he's looking at that stuff on the phone and stuff. And I don't understand how he can say his
Religious life
religious
is in
life
order.
is essentially in order. I don't even get that. I don't think it's in order at all. Well, anyway, this guy goes to a counselor and advise him to go to a 12-step for each of these addictions. Now, if he's going to a SA and an AA groups for these addictions, first of all, he's not in order. And second of all, it goes on to say, and here's the whole point of this section, is that he now sees life in color. That's an alpha image, by the way, seeing life in color. Mm-hmm. I think that's the truth of it. Dishwater to wine, life in color to life in black and white. Me seeing sort of right now, and me seeing, oh, okay. Now, I don't know that when you're seeing life in black and white, or your life is like dirty dishwater, or you're sort of semi-blind like this, that somehow your spiritual life is essentially in order. That's the thing that baffled me about the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I see it. And so he says he called himself converted. I said, absolutely. Yeah. All right.
There's only one page devoted to it, so that we can skip ahead because we have two main topics that we want to talk about to finish this up. And there's a lot on each of these. Gathering ritually around the word and breaking bread. Mm-hmm. For where two or more of you are gathered, we've all heard this, in my name, I am there among them. So in page 232, he talks about the meaning of ritual and our current struggle with it. So why have ritual? I think he explains pretty well rituals in our life, the necessity for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think our culture has, in many ways, lost the meaning of ritual in one sense, and then captured it in a way that doesn't help much. I think, I watch the Steelers. I watch football every once in a while. The way some of those people dress up at those football games, that's ritualistic in many ways. That's a ritual for them. Uh-huh. And I'm not sure, I don't know how that works for them in any way. Mm-hmm. But what Rolheiser is saying here about ritual, he is saying without ritual, your life's going to kind of fall apart. That you need ritual in your life, really healthy rituals in your life for you to not fall apart. And Mass, of course, I think for all that. And I think even us as Catholics, we go to Mass, sitting, standing, going like this, all these different things we do. All those things make sense if you pay attention to what you do with your body. It's also an expression of what we should be doing with our minds and in our hearts as well. So to understand ritual and the actions and the intentions and the intentions of all that and the words of all that, I think is really quite critical for a healthy life. That's what he's trying to say. For a life to be healthy in the postmodern world, we need ritual in our lives in some fashion. Thanksgiving Day dinner with your family. There's an issue that I think that's kind of gotten lost.
Right, yeah. Or everybody, because all the different sports and activities the kids are, that's people don't sit down at 6 o'clock as a family and have dinner.
Right.
And that's lost. So you lose connection to this stuff.
Yeah, that's important. Yes.
And we're going to compare that to our faith here in a moment. The power, something about the power behind these rituals is really something beyond the rational, though. There's something you can't explain.
I can't really explain it. I don't have the words right now to explain why it's important, but it is that we do need that as human beings, this idea of ritual. For example, Beverly and Ray Esch renewed their 50th anniversary this week. And they stood in front of the church. We blessed them. Everybody applauded. They went out to dinner with their family. Beautiful.
Right.
Beautiful. That's what you should be doing.
Yes.
That's ritual that's kind of stuff we're talking about here that we need to be doing with our lives sometimes. Even though I'm the one that loves to pass it out but not be in the middle of it. So,
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, so a lot of our rituals in the Catholic side, we actually elevate to or consider them sacraments.
Yes, we do. Yeah. Sacraments, encounters with God for us, those rituals. Yes. Yeah.
Here we go. We just talked about this one we want to talk about. Rolheiser's second example is regarding our ritual of daily Eucharist. You brought this up at weekly Mass, so you want to maybe share again with us about.
Some of you aren't aware.
Almost verbatim.
I mentioned this on daily Mass the other day about why do people go to daily Mass? And he goes on and on. He says, if you ask a bunch of people, they would tell you a million different reasons of why they go to daily Mass. But he goes on to say, I'll bet you there is one big reason why all these people go to daily Mass. And I include myself in all that. And Jerry's another one, included in that one too. Some people can't but they go because they have to go to work. But they might be watching Liturgy of the Word.
Right.
In one sense, we have a whole bunch of folks that watch that too. So what is it about that everybody watches that or comes to daily Mass? And in our parish, if I can say we have about 130, 140 people that watch Liturgy of the Word, 50
about 50, I count
50
them
people
sometimes.
go to daily Mass. So you're talking maybe, close to 200, not quite.
When
as many
Father
as
Jim Crookston fills in for you, he says, he said, I go to churches on Sunday. You don't get this many people.
Wow.
In the churches,
Yeah, God bless you
smaller
guys.
ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he says the biggest reason is they do it so they don't fall apart. It's a ritual we do whereby it keeps us going in our everyday life.
I use the term sideways personally. If it's been too many days since I've been at
I'm going
Mass,
sideways.
I get sideways.
Yeah. If I didn't pray for a couple of days, what's the thing that they said? Well, if I don't practice for a day, I get it. If I don't practice it, the experts get it. If I don't practice for 3 days, the world gets it. So we got to be doing this stuff.
Yeah.
It's like working out to stay in shape.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So all that. So anyway, so that's kind of why all of you that come to daily Mass, God bless you. Keep on coming, man. It is a great, great thing. And Dawn, I've been seeing you come every once in a while too. Dawn. It's good. You got to see you in there, so that's good. And so it's good to see you guys coming to daily Mass. It's part of my day. It's part of my day.
Well, the rituals too are rituals like daily Mass. They're not meant to stimulate our psyche or heat our emotions to a new level. They are meant to precisely to be predictable, repetitive, simple, straightforward, and brief.
Yeah, if I had an hour-long daily Mass, I bet you we would have no one there.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to do all that stuff, right? And then Sunday Mass is meaningless. Sunday Mass is supposed to be bigger. It should be about a half an hour, and
more intimate.
Yeah. And people go over and have coffee, and their ritual.
Yeah.
A lot of them go for coffee afterwards. Yeah. That's a great thing too.
Yeah.
So
when we were away the other week, Mary Kay said, "Boy, I'm really looking forward to getting back to my church community, going to daily Mass and
being friends with these guys.
Yeah.
Downstairs, solving the problems of the world with all that. That's right. Yeah.
Well, with the time we have, how do you feel about jumping right into the thing that we think we're all doing right, worship and serve the right God, sustaining ourselves by keeping the first commandment? Any Christian hearing this would immediately say, duh, I would never break the first commandment. But, what are we talking about here?
Serving the right God.
Yes, we're at 238.
Sure. He's talking again, this whole idea of our concept, the same thing I was talking about today at Mass, our image of God. I try to share with you today C.S. Lewis's image of God in the Narnia Chronicles to try to capture the words of Simeon to Mary about her son. Your son is going to be the rise and downfall of many in Israel, a sign to be opposed. So here is a God that is not safe, but good. I can't think of a better way than that. And so he goes on to say in this section right here, of worship, we often, I don't have the book here, we oftentimes don't worship the right God. You mentioned before we got on the air here today about many of your friends, did you say, or was it during our time here? You said many of your friends are still worried that they're not going to make it to heaven.
Yeah.
We
said that during the show here.
Yeah, we said that. And it's almost like you're worshiping the wrong God. Yeah. You got the wrong guy. C.S. Lewis has the right guy. Simeon has the right guy. And Julian of Norwich here has the right guy. Completely relaxed. Julian of Norwich, mystic, okay? Here's her description of God. Completely relaxed, courteous. He was himself the happiest at peace he was himself the happiest and peace of his dear friends, his beautiful face, radiating measureless love, like a marvelous symphony. It was that wonderful face shining with the beauty of God that filled the heavenly place with joy and light. So God is completely relaxed himself and at peace with himself and happy with all. He loves you. He's at peace with you too. But that's her description of this right God. So I think he's trying to say that.
Yeah, our God has a frown on his face all the time, and he's got a scorecard, like you're saying.
Yeah, and that's the wrong God. We all learned that one somewhere along the way too.
Rolheiser actually says to have a distorted concept of God, I see you have that underlined up there too, no matter how sincere the misconception, is to worship an idol and break the first commandment.
If your God is a God who's cruel, severe, and keeping score up there, doesn't care if you're down here, you got the wrong guy, you're worshiping an idol. That's pretty much what he's saying.
Yeah, and past our concept of God was too much a projection of our own anger and incapacity to forgive each other. If I'm that way, God must be that.
It's how you go to war and stuff. Yeah. Even the Nazis did it, for God's sake, or the Germans did it. God's on our side. Yeah.
He says today we're throwing that image off, but haven't replaced it with anything better.
Yeah.
That's a struggle.
We're trying desperately to replace it with something better, trying to do that. Yeah, so I'm sorry I had a little bit of a cramp there for a moment about what we were talking about here, but that's the right God. And oftentimes we can get caught up in other people telling us what God, projections of what God is like. So anyway, we have to be careful. Read the Bible.
Like the book behind you, I heard God laugh on the thing. He's
yeah. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
I had a book that we were talking about in my class for faith formation. We were talking about the image of God a little bit, and the whole idea of God does not punish. And I was using a book by the Linds titled "The Image of God" about that one. That God is not if we can talk about God punishing in any sense, they go on to say it's therapeutic. In other words, it restores us. It doesn't destroy us. Yeah. God is not to get us.
Yeah.
He's not to redeem us.
Right.
So if we talk about wrath or punishment in some sense, we're talking about it as a therapeutic thing that's helping us to go forward.
More of a massage than a whipping.
Well, it might sting a little bit more, but it's all for our good. Mm-hmm. Has your parents ever punished you and said, I hate doing this, but this is for your own good?
Yeah, right. I never bought that. No.
I know about that one either, So,
when God finished creation, here's a good positive note. When God finished creation, including the people in it, he says, it is very good.
Very good.
God's first gaze upon us is still that of appreciation. I think a lot of people don't agree with that.
Yeah,
so we've talked about that.
We got to make sure we're worshiping the right God. Absolutely. Amen. And I am convinced that severe, cruel one keeping score is not it. I am convinced.
Well, back to the relaxed God, and then we'll move on to the prodigal son. What we see outside of ourselves is very much colored by what is, first of all, inside us. Thus, Jesus had within him a concept of God who was relaxed, smiling, and blessing the earth. Hence, Jesus too looked out and saw in us something worth smiling and blessing.
Yeah, I think that's a better quote. there than the one I shared. That's good.
And he ends with the example of the
I'm surprised
prodigal
we got
son.
here, folks.
Yeah, we jumped around, sis, and we were kind of putting this together at the last minute today, sort of, and we both kind of ran out of gas. And I just said, "Prodigal son, we know about this to just wing it for our big finish on the topic." But
Here's
Henry
my
now,
thing, okay.
yeah,
But you know what? Jerry had 8 pages of notes with this thing today. It was like we were wow.
I couldn't throw anything out. This was supposed to be a 2-hour show. So.
Well, anyway, the prodigal son in the end is the last set page of the last chapter. So here's the one thing he wants to say to all of us: that yes, we're like the younger son. We do stupid things, and yes, we're like the older son too. And he goes on to say, who was often absent from the father's love and celebration through his bitterness and anger. Many people think that the elder son got a bad break. No, he didn't. He was not a good guy in any way, shape, or form. He did his duty because of his own self-aggrandizement. Now I'm gonna be good so I can get my rear end into heaven. I don't care about you. I don't care about you. I don't care about you. I get my butt into heaven. How selfish can you get? I shouldn't even be caring about getting myself into heaven. And then he goes on to say, Rolheiser does, and this is the book I would like to consider us maybe doing next. Next week we're off.
Right.
And so the book that Nouwen wrote called The Return of the Prodigal Son, which he wrote after he had a breakdown of sorts and ended up, I don't know if it was institutionalized, but he had to go someplace some far away and be able to get therapy. And after he came back, he wrote this book. And he goes on to say, we're like the younger son. We're like the older son. We need to be more and more like the father, caring for others with ourselves. We do all these different things that he's saying that we need to do as postmodern Christians say to sustain ourselves. We become more and more like the Father. And then he goes on to say at one point, to have the courage to let ourselves be embraced when we are sinful and bitter is to, first of all, know a God who, as Jesus, Julian Norwich, and Rembrandt, and Henry Nouwen assure us, is both a blessing Father and a caressing Mother, who sees with the eyes of the heart, who, despite our weakness and angers, sits completely relaxed, smiling, a face like a marvelous symphony. Yeah. And that's sort of how we kind of want to end up here today.
Yeah, we can just have that image of God all the time,
yeah.
even when we mess up.
Yeah. So thanks for watching us, folks, through we got all the way through that book.
Yep.
Isn't that great?
I hope we didn't overdo it, but
yes.
This there's just so much in this that it's a wonderful book.
Yeah. So thank you for watching us today and every other day. And next week we're off because people like to get together, to watch the Super Bowl and things.
Yeah, and Russ and Susie will be watching the Super
Russ
Bowl.
will be
So
he's an Eagle fan, so I'll be watching them.
I used to like that guy. Kidding, Russ. Love you, buddy.
So we'll be back the next weekend after that. We'll talk more about that. And you guys can offer us some ideas or thoughts too, what you think we should consider doing. We could do some other different things too. We'd be happy to try to do that. But for now, that seems to be about it. I need to look up. Oh my gosh, it's 8:00. Oh. Let's call it a night. Thanks, folks, for watching us. We did better with that than I thought we did.
Amazing.
I know. It was
awesome.
I know. Thank you. Steve, thanks a lot.
Thanks
for watching us, everybody. Goodbye now.